Hello. Just seeing if this is working. Hello. Hi everyone. Is this working okay? Can someone put a message in that it's working? Hello, Max Reed. Is it working all right? Can someone tap a message if it's looking okay? Hi, can you hear me, everyone? It's working. Hooray. Excellent. So, if anyone's got any questions, pop them in. If not, I'm going to go from the list from the post previously. One of them was a question about pause, which is post-acute withdrawal syndrome. I think the thing about pause to bear in mind is it's not documented. There's no scientific studies on it. It's incredibly vague. And the symptoms are things like insomnia and anxiety and depression. So obviously it's very difficult to pin down exactly what it is. The time frame's extremely vague as well. It's anything from a few months to a few years after you stop. And it's not just related to alcohol, it's related to lots of other opiates. There's very little to say on it. Personally, I didn't experience it. I'm 5.5 years now having stopped drinking. And I've never experienced it, and most people I've spoken to have never experienced it. And the issue, I suppose, is it can, all of those symptoms, insomnia, anxiety, depression, they can all be caused by a myriad of other things anyway. So it's very difficult to tie it down. And in fact, I think it ties in quite nicely with another question that was here. So this is Louise Rose. I have a question for you. I read your book a while ago, as well as a few others. Over the past 18 months or so, I've drunk on approximately 4 occasions, each time between 1.5 and 2.5 glasses of wine. After doing that, I will realise why I don't drink, then abstain for 4 to 6 months or so. So that's very interesting, because that 4 to 6 months time period is very similar to when pause can kick in. So that's quite interesting. But going on from there, I considered this quite successful, but would really like to be like you and not drink for good. What should I do? I think that brings in 2 or 3 specific things I think we need to keep in mind. One is FAB, fading effect bias. And that, of course, is it's to do with humans and how when we look back on things, we look back on them more fondly than they actually were. And I think what you need to bear in mind is I talk about it on the blog a lot about ambition, and it's that tendency of human beings to belittle or criticise what we have and to idolise what we don't have. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, because it's that drives us to strive for better things. If you're critical of what you've got and idolise what you haven't got, you're constantly pushing forward to do the next thing. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think you need to bear in mind with alcohol, when you are drinking, it's something you have it at that time and you don't like it, you're critical of it, you hate it, so you stop. But then of course when you stop, it gets put into the I don't have it category, and sobriety becomes what you do have. So after a period of time you can become very critical or you start to idolise the drinking days and you want to go back to them. And I think that time period's about perfect, because what you're doing is you're happy to have not drunk, you're fine with it, but then you start to think back through rose-tinted spectacles about your drinking days and how wonderful it was. Of course, it wasn't wonderful at the time, but you start to think it was with the effects of time. And then you go back to it, and of course you go back to it, it's not particularly pleasant, it's horrible, so you quit again. And I think there's not really much you can do other than to keep analysing it and keep that in mind, because I think when you constantly analyse it, you realise that there's not actually that much pleasant about it at all, and that will stop pulling you back in. But I think that comes down to cravings as well. Don't forget, this is idolising something. This is putting it up on a pedestal, and it's fantasy. It's not real. So I think the antidote for that really is just to bear in mind that it's not a real situation you're pining for. Quite often it's the thought and not the reality of a drink, and I would bear that in mind. If you're going for a few months and then you want to start drinking again, what you're fantasising about is exactly that. It's a fantasy only. I'm just going to see if I can find some other questions here. I have a question. I can do about 5 to 14 days without a drink, and then I have to go through with withdrawal and anxiety, and that comes with stopping. I'm fed up and exhausted with the cycle. Well, funny enough, I think I've just pretty much spoken about that. That 5 to 14 days, again, it's a pretty good period for you to get over the drinking and start to sleep better, start to feel generally quite good about things. And when you're in that position, it's very hard for you to remember how miserable and horrible it was when you were actually drinking. And again, after your 5 to 14 days, the thought process you will be going through is, a drink would be really nice. But the fact of the matter is it wouldn't be. Don't forget, when the thought of having a drink enters into your mind, it is a fantasy. You're fantasising about it. It's not real. Think about the reality of it. If you've stopped for a few days and you have a drink, you've got no withdrawal, so it won't do anything other than to make you feel slightly dulled. On top of that, you'll have feelings of guilt and failure, and it isn't a particularly pleasant thing. You're then guaranteeing you'll have a broken night's sleep, and then if you're not actually hungover, you will feel fairly grim the next day. I'm just seeing if there's any other questions. Oh, so Julie Ferguson, the anxiety is unbelievable. How come I never had this before? It seems to increase the older I get. It's to do with your tolerance building up. So to go back to the basics, your brain it has its own chemicals and drugs and hormones, lots and lots and lots of them. And no one really understands how they all fit together, but it fits together quite nicely and creates this nice balance. So when you put in alcohol, it's a depressant, so your brain tries to counter that by putting up the stimulant side. And when the alcohol wears off, you've got too many stimulants, and that's the anxiety. It's almost like an equal and opposite reaction to the alcohol you've put in. And as time goes by, it creates more and more of those stimulants and releases them, and it becomes more proficient at countering the alcohol. So there's two results of that. One, you can drink more. And two, the anxiety gets worse. I'm sorry, but that's drinking. It does get worse. It doesn't get better. The anxiety gets worse, and you need more and more alcohol to get that supposed buzz from the drinking. I'm just seeing if there's any other questions. If not, I'll go on to some of the ones I think from the post before. So I think one of the earlier questions was, do people with addictions ever hit rock bottom, or they keep blaming others and don't take any accountability for their actions and behaviours? Well, I think they do. Yes, lots of them do. I think the thing to bear in mind with rock bottom as well is it's only rock bottom up to now. Unfortunately, with drugs, alcohol included, there's always lower you can sink, and the lowest really you get to is death and suicide. I'm sorry, but until you get there, there's always a lower place to go to. So a rock bottom is essentially the lowest point you've come up till now. And often, all a rock bottom is just things get particularly bad, and it's finally a wake-up call to make you think, yes, you really do have to stop this. And that's the driving point sometimes to get people to look at their drinking and think about stopping. But I think the trouble is, people always say you have to hit rock bottom before you quit. No, you don't at all. That's a ridiculous thing to say. It's like saying you have to get hit by a car before you learn the Green Cross Code. It's just ridiculous. Learn what alcohol is doing to you and stop as soon as you can. Don't wait for it to get worse. I just don't understand why people say that. I think it comes from the fact that we keep returning to drinking over and over again, and people on the outside think, well, it has to get really bad before you finally quit, but unfortunately it doesn't, because the worse it gets, the more addicted you become. and the harder it is to quit. So the best time to quit drinking is now. Don't wait for a rock bottom, because it gets harder and harder to quit. I'm not sure if there's any other questions, or shall I go back to the... is there a way to watch this later? Yes, hopefully, although I've not tried it yet. I think we should be able to... I'll try and save it. If it doesn't work, I'll try something else, but hopefully you'll be able to watch it later. What's my opinion on alcohol-free alternatives? Personally, I quite like alcohol-free beer. I've never tried alcohol-free wine. I've got a bottle of alcohol-free spirits there, called 3 Spirits, but I've not tried it yet because I think it's actually got caffeine in it, which sort of puts me off having it because it's the kind of thing I think I'd drink in the evening. I think the problem is alcohol-free beers and things can be a trigger if the foundations of your sobriety aren't strong enough. If you're quitting and you're white-knuckling it and you're desperate for a drink and you sort of have an alcohol-free beer thinking it's going to be a substitute for alcohol, it isn't. And if you sit there chugging back 8 or 9 of them in an evening, something's not right. So for me, alcohol-free drinks are one of many soft drink options. And I don't have an issue with them at all. In fact, as I say, I quite enjoy them. I've not tried the wine yet, but I think you just need to, I think you have to, your sobriety has to be a bit shaky if you're wary of them. But if you're concerned about them, don't go near them, because ultimately there are other soft drinks out there, lots of them that aren't alcohol-free beers. There's all sorts of things. And now more and more people aren't drinking. There's more and more sort of healthier soft drink options as well. So I hope that answers that one. What do you think about antidepressants? I haven't got a clue about antidepressants, to be quite honest. I've never had them. I know people that have taken them. I think they have quite a few side effects. I think if you have depression and you take it, it doesn't just get rid of the depression, it can leave you a bit dazed and spaced out. But honestly, I don't know about antidepressants. It's not really my area of expertise. I think if you need some kind of medical intervention, you're better off speaking to a obviously doctor or psychiatrist or something. Did you have relapses after you went alcohol free? How did you deal with that? So yes, not after the last time I quit. So I sort of stopped lots and lots of times. I think everyone does, and I kind of think people who are sort of endlessly doing day 1s or day 2s or whatever need to bear that in mind. Most of us have done that for years before it finally clicks into place. And I think what you need to bear in mind is any addiction comes about because part of the addict's brain thinks they need that drug to be happy or to cope with life or to enjoy life. That's the key of addiction. There's the physical side of it as well, I grant you, but take that away. That's why addicts can go 5-10 years and still go back to their drugs, because part of them believes they have to have that drug to enjoy life. I think alcohol is particularly bad because we're constantly bombarded with images of people going out and drinking, and it's very deeply ingrained that you can't enjoy a night out without alcohol. It's not quite the same. So I think alcohol is particularly bad for this. And I think the only way to successfully quit drinking is to completely see alcohol in a different light, and that's the purpose of obviously Alcohol Explained and all the other books. So if one book doesn't work for you, keep looking at something else. But what you're trying to do is build the mindset where you don't want to drink. It just does not interest you at all. And you can do that, but you just have to start seeing it in a completely different way. For me, that was educating myself about what alcohol actually does. And the best way I can sort of describe it is, say you were desperately in love with someone, but then you learn that actually they were cheating on you, they hated you, blah, blah, blah. So it just totally destroyed that love and you just walked away and never wanted to see them again. That's what you have to do, really. There's no point for me, and this is, I think, the problem. Whenever people are trying to stop, they wake up with a shocking hangover and think, oh, I don't want to go through this again. And they try and gel into their mind the hangover. which is fine, but we don't drink for the hangover, we drink for the buzz of drinking, for that lovely feeling. So I think you need to stop looking at the hangover and start looking at why you actually drink, because I think when you break that down and start to really pull it to pieces, it's not the great pleasure we think it is. Going back to the stimulants and depressants, if you're drinking every day, because the period where the alcohol's worn off and you're overly anxious, that's what I refer to as the withdrawal. If you're drinking every day or every couple of days, the withdrawal usually lasts 12 to 36 hours. I'm not talking about withdrawal as in shakes and hallucinations and all the rest of it. It can be much more minor than that, and it's just a feeling of not quite feeling right and feeling slightly anxious. So when people drink regularly, they wake up and they have the withdrawal all day, and then they drink in the evening where they relieve the withdrawal. So what you think of that lovely, relaxing feeling of alcohol is actually just relieving the withdrawal from the previous drinks. And I think you can do a similar thing with socialising. And suppose all the supposed benefits with alcohol, you can actually really dig into them and learn that there's nothing there. And if you continue to drink but actually really analyse your drinking and think about it, that can gel it in your mind. And that can be the triggering point. Certainly it was for me. Nowadays, the thing that puts me off a drink more than anything is the thought of not sleeping. I still remember lying awake at 3 or 4 in the morning feeling anxious and miserable, and then the alarm going off, or 6 or 7, and feeling absolutely shattered. And it's that horrible mix of feeling anxious and tense but also exhausted, and it just doesn't interest me anymore. So another question here. 70 days sober, but the other day I sat in my car, money in hand, to buy gin. I talked myself out of going, but the urge was so powerful and I nearly broke. It scared me how close it came to going back to the sickness. Will it always be like this? No, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be at all. And again, I think for me, it wasn't a question of white-knuckling it, of sitting there with money in hand thinking, I'm not going to buy it. Take a breath and think about, and again, let's go back to what we were thinking about before, about fantasising. Craving is fantasising about having a drink. It's a fantasy. It is not real, what you are doing. Think of the reality. If you'd got out of that car, bought the gin and gone home, poured yourself a drink, okay, the first thing you would have when it hit your mouth, it tastes vile, okay, some vile sugary poison. When it's actually the first mouthful you've taken, then you're going to be overwhelmed by feelings of failure and guilt. Okay, so you're going to be miserable. When the alcohol actually kicks in, you're going to feel slightly dulled and tunnel visioned, and that's some effect of what alcohol actually does for you. It's not a particularly pleasant feeling, it just makes you feel dulled. But when it starts to wear off, you would feel anxious. So far, all you've got out of that is a foul-tasting drink, feelings of failure and self-disgust, a bit of a dulled feeling, and then anxiety on top of it, and then you need another drink to get rid of the anxiety. And I think that really, for me, that was how I countered those kind of feelings. It was just to stop, take a breath, and think through the reality of having that drink. Okay, think of waking up in the night feeling miserable and waking up hungover, but most importantly, think of the supposed buzz, what you'd actually get from it. It's not what you think it is. What you are thinking of is the fantasy, it's the craving, it's the fantasising, it's not the reality. Just keep in mind it is the thought and not the reality of drinking that keeps pulling us back in. And you can counter that with the reality. Force yourself to think of the reality. And don't forget as well, when you're in a panic situation, your subconscious kicks in. The subconscious is stronger when you're in a panic situation, okay? So that's why in the army you go through gun drill over and over and over and over and over again until you're doing it in your sleep. It's so that when you haven't slept for 48 hours and you're soaking wet and freezing cold and you're in a complete panic because you're under fire, you're still going through your weapons drills. The subconscious kicks in and takes over when your conscious mind is panicking and unable to do anything. So when you get into that situation, your conscious mind is just freezing up and your subconscious is kicking in, and all your subconscious is saying is, "Ooh, this is unpleasant, let's have a drink." So one of the best things to do is to just calm down and go through the reality. Certainly that's how I found that really helped. Just seeing if there's anything else. So I have been alcohol-free for 15 months. I rarely ever think about drinking. However, I want to stay strong and not worry about relapse. What do you recommend? To be honest, I would say if you're perfectly happy, I wouldn't worry about it. Just enjoy yourself. There's kind of a feeling that with recovery, you just have to go through the rest of your life miserable and slogging away at it. You don't. If it's working, just enjoy yourself. Go out there and have fun. I think it's useful to remain tied into groups of people who aren't drinking. So that could be your local AA meeting or just some friends who don't drink, or groups like this one, whatever it is, but keep in contact. Because I think if you cut free entirely, you can get sucked in. If you're going out with people and all you hear all the time is, oh, have a drink, it's great, blah, 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 wine, lovely, all the rest of it. You slowly over time will start to get sucked into that mentality again, and I think it can be a bit dangerous. But you recognise these signs coming on before they actually get there. But yeah, I would say just keep in mind, and you'll recognise it, because at some point, what will happen is it will enter your head, oh, it would be nice to have a drink now. You might be on holiday, or it might be Christmas or something like that, or a birthday, and you might think, oh, actually, it would be nice to have a drink. And that's your warning sign that something's starting to go wrong. And that's the time where you need to think, actually, what exactly would be nice? Because I think the lazy way of dealing with that is just think, yeah, it would be nice to have a drink, but I'm not going to have one. And then it will keep coming back and back. But you need to pin those thoughts down. And as I said just now, just go through that reality check. So, okay, what would happen if I did have a drink? Okay, well, it would be some horrible sugary taste with a poison in it, and it would make me feel slightly dulled. And then I would feel anxious, and then I've got a choice of either having another drink to get rid of that anxiety or just suffering the anxiety. And either way, I'm not going to sleep very well tonight, and I'm going to be tired tomorrow. So just keep that in mind, I would suggest. Do you think a lot of people are self-medicating by using alcohol? Yeah, absolutely they are, yeah. Are they only depressed and anxious because of alcohol itself? That's a very good one, isn't it? Because I think the problem is what we can't escape from is alcohol is a depressant. So if you are feeling depressed, you see, there is a huge link between alcohol and depression. And it's the chicken and egg situation, and the question is it people with depression that turn to alcohol, or does alcohol cause depression? And I think the answer is it's both, because as I've described, the chemical imbalance that alcohol causes depression anyway. But I think if you've got depression, alcohol is the easiest to obtain drug to take the edge off it in the short term. But I think the thing to bear in mind with that is anyone who's drinking heavily, if you go to the doctor and say, I've got depression, and he said, do you drink? And the answer is yes, I drink quite a lot. He will tell you to stop drinking, and that's it. He won't touch you, he won't send you to anyone else, he won't give you any medication. Well, he might do, but he shouldn't do, he or she, so I'm being really sexist there. But and there's a reason for that, because when you're drinking, you're constantly messing with the chemical balance in your mind. You cannot know if your depression is caused by the drinking or some underlying issue. The only way to address it is to stop drinking totally, and then to see where you are. And if at that point you do have genuine depression, that is the time to go to a doctor. I'm not drinking anymore, I've got depression. And they will then go through a process of experimentation to see what works for you. Because again, don't forget, the brain is phenomenally complicated and we don't really understand it at the moment in our knowledge as a human race. As I say, we know it creates and excretes drugs, hormones and chemicals, but we don't even have a full list of those, let alone do we know how they all play together. So dealing with something like that is always a very close partnership between the patient and the doctor, of the doctor trying things, the patient seeing how they feel and what the side effects are. But self-medicating, yes, I think everyone does, and I think that's one of the problems with it, because when something bad happens, and bad things happen all the time, and I'm talking minor things like you get a bill you can't pay, to being diagnosed with terminal illnesses or friends and family dying, everything. But I think as drinkers, we reach for a drink all the time. and it exacerbates problems because the next day when we wake up, because of the chemical imbalance, we feel even worse. So yeah, I hope that helps a bit. Have you thought about doing a podcast? And are you going to write another book? No, I haven't really done. I get invited to do podcasts, and that's all I do really. And there's a couple of videos on YouTube, I think. But apart from this, no, that's it. Yes, I probably am going to write another book, but no time soon. When I wrote Alcohol Explained, obviously it's self-published on Amazon, and the beauty of that is you can just upload a new manuscript. It's really good because you don't have to, if you think of something new, you can put it in and upload it and it's there. So that was great for a while because it was almost a constant work in progress. Every few days or weeks or months, whenever I thought of something new or a better way of explaining something, I'd put it in the book and upload it. The problem with that is because I then got the audio book done, it kind of sets it in stone a bit because I didn't want to keep changing the paperback and the Kindle version and then have the audio book different. So I thought, well, what I'll do, I'll just wait a longer period till I've got a lot of rewriting to do. And then I can just rewrite the book, upload it, and then get a new recorded version for the audio done. And when I sort of went through the process of cobbling together the bits and pieces to add to it, it's almost as long as the original book. And the other thing that kind of concerns me about rewriting it too much, I got it translated into French, and the lady who was doing it kept coming to me saying, I don't like this bit, I do like this bit, blah, blah, blah. And what I found was the bits I thought were really good, she didn't like. And I downloaded it on Kindle the other day because it shows you who's underlining what. Or not who, but it shows you the bits that people are underlining a lot of. And some of it I wasn't particularly happy with, but people have underlined it. So I think the problem with me rewriting the original version is, it's almost if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why would I rewrite it? It seems to be helping people. I'm inclined to leaving it as it is, because what I don't want to do is rewrite it and then it's not helpful to anyone. So for all those reasons, I think I'll probably do a sort of Alcohol Explained 2. But to be honest, it's nothing more than is what's on the blog anyway. It's just all my blog posts really that I'm going to cobble together and rewrite them so they're a bit tidier and sort of explore some of the ideas a bit further, and just to put it in a book. So if you're interested, just go back over the old blog posts. So it'll be some of the things there to develop. So yeah, but no time soon, I'm afraid, because I'm a bit busy at the moment. But for me, it was the awful dreams mostly recurring when I was drinking. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the problems. Alcohol messes with your sleep horrendously. So with sleep, you go through different, I kind of think of it like an aeroplane flying through different, stratospheres of the sky. That's what sleep is. You go up and through different stages of consciousness. For example, one of the key stages of sleep is REM sleep, which I mentioned in the book. But the funny thing with REM sleep is your brain lights up as if you're wide awake. It's a bit strange, no one quite knows what it is, but it's almost like you're awake when you're in REM sleep, which shows that you can go into deep sleep, which is deeply unconscious, up through the different layers. And of course, when you've drunk, you're right down, you can't go into REM sleep. And then of course, when the stimulants start to, your alcohol wears off and the stimulants are up, you can't sleep at all. So it completely ruins your sleep. And you do have those horrible dreams. I remember having dreams where it felt so real and I couldn't wake myself up for them. You wake up kind of pouring with sweat. Very bizarre. Hello from California. So just see if actually I think we're about past now anyway. Excellent. So just see if there's any more questions. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately I've had a bit of a relapse. The trouble is as well, I think just bear in mind that when you first stop drinking, it is really great. You're sleeping, everything feels good. But again, it comes back to just natural human tendency to take things for granted. I think after a few months, you can get to the point where, yes, you're sleeping well and you feel a lot better, but that's the norm. And you just take it for granted. But you're still thinking back on alcohol, thinking, oh, I used to enjoy drinking. It used to be fun. You forget the fact that the fun part of it was just relieving the withdrawal and misery and tiredness that all the other drinks have caused. All you have in your mind is, I used to like drinking. You take your sobriety for granted. And I think that's one of the issues with it. All you can do, what I would say is if you are having a bit of a relapse at the moment, try and concentrate on your drinking, really put it to the test. Now, Saturday night, so if you're, Saturday night I'm going to go out and have a few drinks, well, don't go out, stay in and drink the drinks you would drink without TV or radio or friends or company. Just sit and drink them and see how pleasant or unpleasant it is. See if it's worth the insomnia and the anxiety and all the rest of it. That's one of the strongest things you can do, actually. So I would say if you are drinking at the moment, looking for a way to stop, try and do it in solitude and do it on your own, and do it without any distractions and really concentrate on the whole thing. It can be a bit of an eye-opener. And I think that's probably about it. How are we doing for time? Oh, it's past on the dot. So what I will probably do... Oh, someone else, yes, I wake up in the night and I haven't had a drink for nearly 9 months. Have a look on the website. I think it's one of the old blog posts, and it was some tips on sleep. And I think one of them, funnily enough, if you go to bed too early, you can wake up in the night, because if you need 8 hours, but you're going to bed at, say, 10 and waking up at 7, you're actually in bed for 9 hours. And the natural tendency is you'll wake up for an hour in the middle of the night. So bizarrely enough, the thing to do might be to set an alarm and go to bed a bit later. Make sure you get up exactly, if you can, depending on work and kids and all the rest of it. But if you can, get up at exactly the same time every day, and fiddle around with the time you go to bed, because you might find you're going to bed too early. But have a look on the website. I think it's an old blog post on some tips on sleep. If none of those help, I'm afraid I can't help. That's all of it. Oh, hello, Dawn. Your book is so different to the other books available. What inspired you to write it? How long had you been sober when you started writing it? I can't remember now. I think it was... So where are we now? We're 19 now. So I think I stopped in February 14. And I think I published it first of all in 15. So it's probably just over a year. What inspired me to write it was a strange one, because it was almost, I hoped it would help people because it helped me, but at the time I hadn't quite put my finger on how understanding it could help. But I think now I've kind of articulated it to myself that knowing the ins and outs of it properly can make you look at it and think, you know what, I don't want this anymore. And it's not a question of resisting or white knuckling it, I just genuinely don't want it. And I think that education process, but also I think there was an element of, I'm kind of one of these people that walks into a room and if things aren't quite square and tidy, I have to put them right. And for me it was almost like everyone had such a warped view of drinking. Oh, it's fun and most people can drink and not get addicted to it and all of this, and it's so utterly wrong. And I almost kind of just had to set out why, just to explain it all as I see it, just to sort of set the wrongs to right more than anything. And when I was writing it, actually, I sort of was plagued by doubts. I was thinking, this is all very interesting, but how does it actually stop people drinking? And then people might be reading it thinking, yeah, great, thanks, but how do I stop drinking? But what I realise now is actually it's the knowledge itself that's important. So I think the answer is I was about a year sober, and it was kind of a mix of things that made me write it. I put it off for ages. I really didn't want to write it because I just couldn't be bothered. It's because I was obviously got young kids and a fairly busy job, and I just couldn't bear the thought of having to write a book. And I think I was out running one morning and I remember just making the decision, I'm just going to sit down and write this, and fine, it's done. I don't need to worry about it then, because it was kind of like a tap dripping on my mind, thinking you should really write this down, because if it helps people. I've been to AA meetings and a lot of people were saying, I don't understand why I do this, I don't understand why I have to keep drinking when I start. I was thinking, well, I kind of know that, and it felt like I ought to try and share the knowledge somehow, so that was that. So I'll probably say goodbye now. I'm going to hopefully get to the point of saving this, so hopefully it will be there to watch later. What I was also going to say was I'll probably do another one if people have enjoyed it. I'll do a post or something, and if you put in what time or day would suit, because there's no point doing the same time all the time, because with people in different time zones, I'm not sure I'll try and chop and change it. But anyway, thanks everyone, and I'll, as I say, I'll try and save this for watching later. Thank you, bye.